All right, so my fleet of Milwaukee batteries right here is probably a good 10 years old or so. They do work. You can push the button on them and you do get a response and everything is working. They just run down quickly. Like if you're using a power tool, it'll run down in 5 minutes flat, and that's the end of it. So I'm going to upgrade these batteries. I'm going to show you what cells I'm using, what nickel strips I'm using, what spot welder I'm using, all that good stuff coming up right now. So we're going to take this 4 amp hour battery pack and we're going to upgrade that to a 5 amp hour. You can also do this with a 3 amp hour and upgrade it to a 5 amp hour. And I've got some 3 amp hours, but right now we're working on this one. So let's go ahead and get our screws out. This is a Torx 10 security bit. The long screws go on the side with the meter, and the short screws go on the other side. So there's 2 different kinds of screws here. Now this cover's coming right off, but sometimes they're kind of tight. So if that happens, just put a screwdriver in there and put a little supply on there, and that'll take care of that. So we've got some drywall dust in here. We're going to be cleaning that out too. Let's see if this will come out. Nope. So go ahead and gently pry, kind of evenly, from both sides. Being careful not to let your screwdriver puncture any of the actual battery cells. That would be not too good. There we go. Not too bad at all. Came right out. All right, so what we want to do right here is leave these parallel strips intact right here, except for this one. We're going to cut this one. But we want to cut these right here. There's 8 like this right here. That way we can get the batteries out, okay? Don't cut here, because that's not going to do you any good. Now, some people like to use the diagonal cutters like this in here, but these are kind of big and a little bit on the dangerous side. You want to make sure, because this one is fairly safe, because that's the negative side of the battery, but on this one's the positive side of the battery. When you're cutting this, if you accidentally short this and you break the jacket right here, and the negative is right here, so you'll easily short the positive to the negative and possibly start a fire. So when I'm going to use a Dremel tool. That's just the way I prefer to do it. And even with that, you have to be super careful on this not to let that Dremel tool go down and then cut into the battery pack. So let's go ahead and do that. See that? Just cut the surface and don't cut into the battery. Sorry, I should have said to go ahead and cut right here first. That way you isolate the batteries from the BMS and all that stuff. So let me go ahead and cut here. And then do the other side over here where the positive is at, on this one, on the single one. Okay. Now just take your fingernail and kind of bend these tabs out of the way right there so it's completely disconnected. There we go, right there. Now what I'm going to do, see this one's loose. I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest of these on both sides and we'll be right back. All right, so we got all our strips cut right here on both sides. If you're not used to doing this, it's a good idea to take a marker and mark your plus. We got the plus sides of the batteries right here. See how they go? Plus, minus, plus, minus, plus, and then we wind up with minus on the other side over here. So after the strips are cut, it pretty much falls apart from here. Just take it apart, just like so, and all of our batteries will come right out. There we go. And this last one here will do the same thing because it's not cut on the other side. So just take it like that and go like that and we're out. Now if you look right here, when you put this piece back right here, top plus, right? That corresponds to our plus that we put here. So don't mix this up because you can get this in backwards. And if you do, it's going to be a whole lot of sadness when you find out. Now this temperature probe thing, was just stuck down on the battery with a little dot, like a little felt thing. They're junk. They don't stick back once you peel them off. So I'm going to replace that with one of those furniture little feet things that you put on your furniture you can get from Lowe's. Just make sure it's small enough to fit on the battery. All right, so our original cells right here are the Samsung 20Rs right here. These are the 2000 milliamp hour cells. Times 2, that's our 4 amp hours. Now, I recommend you go back with the Samsung cells, but I'm going to use the EVE cell, EVE. This is a very good cell. I've used it in other batteries, and they do seem to work pretty good. This one is the 2.5 amp hour, and that's how we're going to get our 5 amp hour because the battery is series parallel, so we get double that. These are cheaper than the Samsung cells, but I recommend you use the Samsung cells because that's what the manufacturer had in there, okay? All right, so remember the battery is all full of drywall dust. I've taken all my plastic parts, the ones that don't have any electronics, and I've washed them in the sink with a brush. You don't have to do that, it does nothing. But this board is looking pretty dusty too, so we don't want to use water on that. So I'm going to use a little bit of this Deox right here and just squirt some on a toothbrush. And then kind of clean everything up like this, just to make it look nice. It doesn't benefit any, it's going to work the same, but why put it back together all nasty, right? I've already done the bottom here. Now I'm going to take some compressed air and kind of dry that off of there so it's not going to be wet when I put it all back together. So if you haven't done this before or you're a little bit new at it, you're going to want to use a spot welder that's got a little bit of power. I'm going to use 0.2 strips, all right? So if you measure the factory strips, they come out to right around 11 thousandths, all right? Now that corresponds to about 0.27 millimeters, so it's almost 0.3. Now these are 0.2, so that's even smaller than the factory ones. You don't really want to go lighter than that. If you got any heavy-duty situations like a drill, mixing concrete or thin set or something like that, it takes a lot of power, or even a saw, that takes a lot of power. So let me show you the difference here. This is our little spot welder, our battery-powered spot welder. This is the 0.2 strip on an old battery that I've cleaned off. So there's a little something there, but watch. Nothing. It just, you might as well stick it with a piece of tape. All right, so here's the same test with our CC spot welder on full power. So you can see the difference there. I'm actually having to rip it off of there. So I wouldn't use one of the battery-powered welders for this. They just don't have enough power. You can see the clear difference. So I got these batteries from 18650 Battery Store. I'm not affiliated with them whatsoever, but they do seem to sell good batteries and they ship them out fast. And they usually come pretty well balanced. But you're going to want to go through every one of these and check them to make sure they are balanced. 358 on down the line. Pretty much every one is 358. And they're all pretty much 358, so that's a good thing. I'm going to leave them alone. If they weren't balanced, if they were out of balance a little bit, what you can do is take all of them and line them up like we got them here and run some nickel strip on both sides and then use like a wooden block on each side with a clamp and clamp them together and leave them like that for several hours and they'll all balance out. But we don't have to fool with that because everything's good. All right, so let's go ahead and put this puppy back together. Now I've gone ahead and marked my paper right there. That way there's no chance that I'm going to get it backwards myself with the plus. So that's our first one. And just go on down the line, switching them every time. Make sure they're all the way down or it won't fit back in the pack when you go to do that. And there we are, we wound up with minus on the other side. Then put back your middle piece. Remember, it's marked top, so that's going that way towards the BMS. And plus is our first battery here. So top plus like that. And just put the second row in the same way. So you might have noticed that the batteries are trying to pop out of there a little bit. So I usually will wire tie these puppies together so that you solve that problem. Yeah, because if they're not all the way down, when you go to put it back in the pack, in the box right here, it's going to be too tall and you'll never squeeze it back together. Now, if I didn't mention this earlier, don't work on a metal surface. When you turn this thing on its side like this to work on it, you're going to short everything out and it's going to be a disaster. So work on something non-conductive. This is like a foam mat that you would put in a gym or something like that. Anything non-conductive. So what you want to do next is put your parallel strips back down like so, and then we need to make our series strips like so. So kind of measure them. I'm gonna have to turn this so I can see it. And don't let this short out across here. Just kind of get an idea how long it needs to be, and then we'll adjust it later. So probably about right there. We'll cut it. I like to cut little dog ears on the corners right here for the positive side. Just kind of smash it. When you put it on here, it won't try to slip under there. You don't want that. So now what I want to do is kind of position it where I want it. And then I'm going to mark it again right here and right here. All right. All right, so the reason I marked it like that is I want to make a little bend, like a 45 right there. And then bend this one down at 45. Now we want to straighten it back out. We don't want this to be too tall, otherwise it'll be too wide to go back in the pack. So just a little bit of a bend right there, just to make a little hump in the middle. Now that's probably pretty good right there. What I need to do is make 7 more of these. There's 8 positions in total. Now before you go ahead and spot weld those on there, you'll want to tin this, because I'm going to solder this part here instead of spot welding that. So just go ahead and do a light tinning on there. Very light is better than too thick. Just like so. And you'll want to do the same thing to the back side of your piece right here. Very light. All right, so go ahead and perfectly position your piece on there like so. Now what I like to do with the spot welder is I'll kind of give it a hard press and then I'll let off of it. That kind of bends the metal to make sure it's in full contact right there. And then come in there with the other one. Press and let go. Now what I've done is I've set the spot welder so it's got about a 2.5 second delay. If you've got one with a foot pedal, that's even better. Next, go ahead and hit that one again. Press hard, let go. Press hard. There we go. Do the other side. Now we're going to solder the middle. So if you have one of these kind of clamps right here, you might want to take it and just kind of push it on the end right there and just squeeze that before you solder it. That'll help it not be so thick anymore. And that should do that. All right, so one thing I didn't show you earlier that is kind of an important thing is you're going to want to take your Dremel tool or a file or whatever you got and go underneath all of these strips, the factory strips where you cut them, and deburr these things, right? You don't want little burrs sticking down, and then when you press this back into the pack, you're pushing it into the battery, potentially shorting the positive one out right here. Make sure you do that. Also, when you're soldering these, make sure that they're not actually contacting the plastic surface of the battery right here, because you could melt it together, and you don't want to do that either. If it's kind of close, take a little dental tool or something and slide it under there and pick up on that, just to make sure you've got clearance between the battery and the strip. All right? So let's do another one real quick. Hard press and back off. All right, just like that. Now I'm going to do the rest of these, the other 6, just like that, and then we'll be right back. All right, so I've got all my strips made. I went ahead and hooked up the positive one as well. See, I came off of here right here and bent it down, and then I bent it back up to make a little hump right there, and then bent it back down. And I did put 6 spot welds on each one of these because it's the main one, so I gave it a little bit of extra grab right there. All right, so I got a piece right here cut to approximately the right size. So we just need to make a bend in it so that it goes down and contacts the battery surface. See if that's good right there. Oh yeah, I think we can live with that. Now I've already tinned the solder right here, and I'm going to go ahead and tin the back of our piece right here. Now this one here, I think we can go ahead and solder before we spot weld it on there. Nice and flat right there. And we're going to solder that again here in a minute. That's just to hold it. All right, very nice. Now, one thing that I did all around this whole thing is I kind of cut the solder down so it's a little flatter, because you don't want this thing any extra wide because you're going to have a hard time putting that down in the pack. So let's go ahead and do that right here. Just shave it a little is all you need. And that's probably good right there. Let's get our temperature probe hooked up and this puppy is done. All right, I got my little felt dot right here. And just push him down. Just like that. You're gonna need a small one. So now you'll notice when you push the button right here. Uh-oh. No lights. Now what? Yeah, so it's no problem. You just have to reset the battery. Just put it on the charger. If you do it this way before you put it back in the pack, make sure you get your pins right. So I'm going to kind of pull that back so I can see what I'm doing here. Right there. Leave it on there for a couple of seconds and it should work now. Oh yeah, that did the trick. We got one light there. And that's about what we would expect. So let's get it back in the pack. All right, so these spring things are a little bit of a pain in the neck right here. I think that one for DeWalt is much easier to work with, but nevertheless, this is what it is. So kind of put him in like that. And I'm not going to be able to show you exactly what I'm doing here, but basically the spring will push on this right here, and you'll kind of push on one and then slide it over. And you'll need to take a tool and push it in there to get the other spring on top of this one. And then I'm pushing the other side like so to try to get that. Nope. Like that. Not good. Not the greatest. But anyway, I'm going to put the 4 screws back in it, put it on the charger, and let's come back for the results. All right, so I've let this charge and we've got our green light. We've got 4 bars on our indicator. Let's check our voltage. I use these flat connectors because the meter probes don't want to go through these little holes right here, so this makes it easy to access. Almost 20.8, that's very good. Now how about the real test? Let's put it in a tool We happen to have a drill sitting right here. Oh yeah. Working great. Now I don't have a fancy label maker, so I just made my own label with a piece of tape, and then I covered over with some shipping tape so that that doesn't rub off of there. Very easy to do that, and I took the sides here and I scribbled out the 4.0, and that's it. I hope this video has been helpful. Thanks for watching.